All right, let's move on to number 4 on our list, and that's Tyler Bertuzzi, who, of course, was a great fit with the Boston Bruins after going there from the Detroit Red Wings. He's got that, that snarl, that grit to his game, and can certainly produce offensively as well. And he'll be looking for a nice deal this summer as one of the top players on the free agent market. So Tyler Bertuzzi, where do you see him going, Chad?
Yeah, so this is a bit of a tough one because we know this is a player who can produce and plays with that bite, like you alluded to. But just talking about his production, 30 points in 50 games last year between Detroit and Boston. And his highest is 62 in 68 games in 2021-22 with Detroit. He's currently on a deal that pays him $4.75 for the last 2 years. And I think he'll probably get a raise, but maybe not by much because he's been a player that's been in and out of the lineup so much, especially going back to the bubble years where he wasn't able to play in Canada. So I was thinking about that a little bit. I have a feeling the player doesn't want to play in Canada for personal reasons. However, I have him going to a Canadian team just because I think the fit makes a lot of sense. And I think Bertuzzi, if that's the case, if he doesn't want to play in Canada, might be able to tolerate it for a chance to play with Connor McDavid in Edmonton. I think that fit would be a match made in heaven. How great of a fit was Evander Kane in Edmonton playing with McDavid? Adding a player like that who brings some bite and can score to give you some depth scoring in the playoffs. So to take a little bit of the load off of McDavid and Draisaitl, that is the perfect fit for me in Edmonton. And the deal I have him signing would be $5 million AAV for 3 years. So the player is only 28. Okay, that would bring him to 33. And at that point, on a 3-year deal, not a 5-year deal. I think I said that. So that would bring him to 31.
Yeah.
And at that point, you'd be betting on yourself. Playing 3 years with McDavid, if things don't go well, Connor leaves your last year and then you get flipped at the deadline or something. Or things do go well, you win a cup, Connor stays, and you re-sign in Edmonton. So I think you're betting on yourself with a 3-year deal. Bertuzzi is. And I think it makes a ton of sense. So what do you think of that one?
Yeah, well, I love the fit, first of all, and we know that Edmonton certainly does need to add another top 6 forward. We certainly expect Kyler Yamamoto, who makes just over $3 million to be dealt here at some point to give them some extra space, and Yamamoto just hasn't been able to produce in Edmonton like they had hoped. But it makes a lot of sense, man. I mean, who wouldn't want to go to a team that I really feel is close to a Stanley Cup win? They could certainly be the Stanley Cup champions in 2024. You get to go and play with the best player on the planet. And the general manager, too. Ken Holland from your days in Detroit. So I think it'd be a great fit. It's just a matter of Edmonton trying to, exercise some salary cap gymnastics in order to make that work, because they're right up against it and they're going to have to get creative. And like I said, we certainly expect Kyler Yamamoto to be moved on from here very shortly.
So there you go. There's your $3 million or whatever he makes. Free up another 2 and you've got Bertuzzi. Because I think something around a $5 million times 3 years, I think that makes a ton of sense. Like I said, bet on yourself. And I'm glad you mentioned the Ken Holland connection as well. His first 2 contracts, Bertuzzi that is, were signed by Ken Holland. So there is that connection there. I just think this is a match made in heaven. I don't see him going back to Detroit. There's no chance he can re-sign in Boston. They just don't have the cap space. I think if any team in Canada, that is going to be able to do it, it would be Edmonton. I think the stars are just aligning to see Tyler Bertuzzi in Edmonton.
Oh, I love that, man. And geez, this it kind of contradicts my pick a little bit, because I've got him going back to the Boston Bruins. We know that we know that Don Sweeney has that as a priority to re-sign him, especially with the little bit of extra space that they have after sending Taylor Hall and Nick Foligno to the Chicago Blackhawks for Alec Regula and Ian Mitchell, two defensemen, by the way, who Jim Montgomery is very familiar with. But it's going to be tough for the Bruins salary cap wise, and so that was the toughest exercise for me with armchair GM and cap friendly, and the fact that Boston needs a centerman, because I think we expect and anything could happen, but I think we all expect that Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci will not be back with the Boston Bruins. I mean, we'll see, but
we will see. I don't know if I would say I expect that yet. I think, like, Patrice, I think, is a guy who, I know he's had those back issues, but he might just be able to do one more year. I don't know if it's feasible, because you'd have to pay him again. And him and Krejci both had pretty good years considering their age, and especially Krejci considering he went overseas for a couple of years and came back and was just as good. But I just, when I was looking at it, you've got Bergeron and Krejci to sign, or if neither of them come back, then a center to replace those two guys, which is going to be tough. You can't be running, Thomas Nosek as your first line center, second line center. So, you have to figure that out. And then Bertuzzi doesn't play down the middle, so that would be tough. But then also, you have Jeremy Swayman to deal with as well. Like, are you going to move on from him? Is someone going to offer sheet him? Are you going to sign him and then move Allmark? Like, the cap situation there just freaks me out. I don't know what they're going to do, but I just don't know if Bertuzzi works. Like, what kind of contract do you have him signing there?
Well, I've got Bertuzzi at around 5x5 in Boston, but man, it was tough trying to do this in cap friendly. So, and this has been rumored as well, but maybe they could find a taker for a guy like Matt Grzelcyk, who makes close to $4 million at around $3.7 million approximately for another season. You could buy out Mike Riley in the final year of his $3 million deal, or just find a taker. Like, he's from Illinois. Maybe you send him to Chicago for futures or whatever. But and then I know that they would probably like to re-sign a guy like Garnet Hathaway as well, and that wouldn't be an issue. It'd be pretty cheap. That I think you'd be able to bring a guy like that back, probably just over $1 million. But you've got Jeremy Swayman, as you mentioned. And you've also got Trent Frederick, who had a nice season last year. I think he had 17 goals, and is a younger player and plays that Boston Bruins type of game, and so he's definitely due for a pay raise as well. So it was tough, but I was able to, make it fit. But, at the end of the day, you're left with basically nothing, a couple of $100,000 in cap space by bringing back Tyler Bertuzzi at 5x5. But who knows what they do? If Bergeron and Krejci come back, maybe they decide to move on from Linus Ullmark instead of Jeremy Swayman, given that he is younger and is considered to be the goalie of the future. This one was tough, but we've seen reports out there that Boston would really like to bring Bertuzzi back. Just don't know how they're going to do it, but I could see it ending up being around a 5x5 kind of deal. But maybe they would be able to consider, or maybe they would be able to convince him to take a bit of a cut in Boston versus what he could get out on the open market. But I like your Edmonton idea. That makes a ton of sense as well, with a nice connection there.
Yeah, so just on the Boston thing, on your cap-friendly armchair GM, who do you have playing down the middle if they bring back Bertuzzi, and who do you have in net?
Yeah, so that's that's the interesting thing. It was tough. I mean, Pavel Zacha had a good season last year and had chemistry with David Pastrnak. Now, he's not a first-line center, but you could roll with him as your first-line center between Marchand and Pastrnak. Then you've got Coyle at number 2. Trent Frederick's natural position is center, so maybe you move him to your third line center spot, and then Mark McLaughlin, who we've seen a little bit, would come in as your fourth line center. So I know that sounds a little thin down the middle, but I mean, if you want
Arizona has a deeper center core than that, man. Like there's no chance they cannot do that. If both guys can't come back, I don't see a world where they sign Bertuzzi. And if they do, and their center depth looks like that going into game 1, like they are in trouble because the Atlantic is only getting better.
Yeah. Well, and I could see Boston like looking for a top line center through the trade market, rather than going to free agency, because I think the next best option after Ryan O'Reilly would probably be JT Compher, who had a nice season last year, but again, like he can also play wing. That was kind of an outlier season for him. How much would he want? All of it? So I don't know. Maybe they don't bring back Bertuzzi at all, clear some more space, and you bring in another Lindholm and Elias from Calgary. Who knows? So.
And maybe you include a guy like Swayman or Ullmark in a deal for a center, because you've got two guys who are number 1 goalies. It doesn't make any sense to have both of them there, because I'm sure Swayman is going to want some good money, at least as far as goalies go. So maybe they figure it out that way, but then the cap still has to work. So I don't know. It's going to be a tough off season for the Bruins, man.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it's going to be really tough for sure. But we know that they want to keep him, but it's just a matter of making it work financially. That's going to be hard. So